Let's return to our study in the Gospel of John. We are now in chapter 19, verses 8 through 11, and we could title this Pilate's Fear. Yeah, fearful that his prisoner might secretly be one of the gods, and getting no response from the Lord Jesus, Pilate asserts his authority. But the Lord Jesus tells him that that authority is limited, granted to him from above. Chapter 19, verse 8. So when Pilate heard that word, he was more frightened. Pilate heard that word. Pilate heard that he made himself the Son of God. Indeed, Pilate had been cynical about the Lord Jesus, but that cynicism apparently was accompanied by fear, a fear which increased as he heard that perhaps the one he had just told his men to whip was a divine being. We need to understand that Pilate, being a Roman, probably didn't understand monotheism and Jewish religious traditions and Jewish religious ideas. In his mind, the terms God and Son of God would bring up Roman polytheistic concepts of divinity. And that word God, whether it's a capital G or a lowercase g, is theos. The Romans and the Greeks had tales about their gods disguising themselves as humans, even having a child by a human woman, and then calling that child a son of a god. So Pilate feared that perhaps Jesus, who had just been scourged, whipped, was a god or a son of a god, and that according to all the stories he had heard about the gods, that would be big trouble for him. The last thing any Roman wanted to do was to get a god mad at him. Pilate must have noticed that this prisoner was extraordinary. Perhaps he was afraid that he was one of the local gods who was playing with him and was actually very dangerous. We see one example of this sort of thing in Acts 14:11. Now the crowd, seeing what Paul did, lifted up their voices in the Lycaonian language, saying, "The gods, being made like men, have come down to us." Chapter 19, verse 9. And again he went into the official residence, the Praetorion, and he says to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus an answer did not give to him. As was explained in the video about John 18:28, the word here translated the official residence of the governor is this Greek word praetorion, and it comes from the Latin word praetorium, which referred to the official residence of a Roman military governor, such as Pilate. Carson explains that the praetorion was normally in Caesarea, and you can check out Acts 23:33 through 35 about that. But whenever the governor went to Jerusalem, his residence there would be called the praetorion. And for more details about this word praetorion, again, see the video that discusses John 18:28. So Pilate, having heard that Jesus made himself the Son of God, and fearing that he'd come from Mount Olympus, asked him, "Where are you from?" The Lord Jesus did not give him an answer, perhaps because there was no answer that Pilate could understand, unless Pilate changed his attitude towards the Lord Jesus and towards the truth. Certainly, the Lord Jesus was willing to answer Pilate's question, but Pilate was not willing to become someone who could understand his answers. Pilate's unwillingness was proven in chapter 18, verses 37 and 38. We are reminded of Isaiah 53:7, which says, "He did not open his mouth." Chapter 19, verse 10. So Pilate says to him, "To me you do not speak? Do you not know that I have authority to crucify you, and I have authority to release you?" Pilate was well aware of his dignity, and he was astonished that this prisoner dared to not answer his question. Was this prisoner stupid? Did not the prisoner care that Pilate might soon sentence him to death? Death on a cross? Pilate proclaims his power. Actually, the one who has the authority to release and the authority to destroy is the Lord Jesus and not Pilate. Chapter 19, verse 11. Jesus answered, "You would have no authority at all over me unless it was given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you has the greater sin." The Lord Jesus rejected Pilate's statement about his authority. You would have no authority at all over me. The Lord Jesus' statement is very clear. We understand that the phrase from above refers to God the Father, so that God's sovereignty is emphasized again in the Gospel of John. Perhaps Pilate thought it referred to Caesar, but no, it referred to God the Father. Now, the identity of the one who handed over the Lord Jesus to Pilate is difficult to know for certain. Perhaps he meant Judas, because Judas handed over the Lord Jesus to Pilate's soldiers. Indeed, the Greek word translated hand over is paradidomi, and it's used of Judas in 664 and 671 and 12:4 and 13:2, 13:11 and 21, 18:2 and 18:5. But Carson and Beasley Murray and Morris suggest that it was the Jewish leaders or Caiaphas himself that handed over the Lord Jesus directly to Pilate and not Judas. If it is Caiaphas that's meant, or the Jewish leaders, then the statement of the Lord Jesus is in accord with the tendency of the Gospel of John to emphasize the wrong of the Jewish religious leaders, not the wrong actions of Pilate and Rome. So the one who has the greater sin could have been the former disciple of the Lord Jesus, Judas, but more likely it was the high priest of the Jewish nation or the Jewish leaders in general. It is interesting to compare the Lord Jesus' silence when asked, "Where are you from?" in verse 9, with his response to Pilate's claim to have authority over Jesus. Why was he silent in the first case, but actively corrected Pilate in the second case? Of course, answering why questions, we often find ourselves in speculation. Here we might guess that the Lord Jesus could ignore questions about himself, but Pilate's claim to have authority detracted from the Father's glory, and that was something the Lord Jesus felt obligated to correct. So by way of summary, chapter 19, verse 8 through 11, fearful that his prisoner might secretly be one of the gods and getting no response from the Lord Jesus, Pilate asserts his authority, but the Lord Jesus tells him that that authority is limited, granted to him from above.